the nice thing about this stuff is people will start to learn the difference between a brisket and a brisket. So,
what do you mean?
the different, like this brisket is part of two parts of the muscle of a cow.
Okay.
That you take from that you normally smoke, and you get basically two different types of cuts. You get the one which comes from most blood in my hair, most supermarkets, which is like the thinly rolled thing that you get with the string round.
Yeah.
Which is basically only good slow cooked in an oven or a slow cooker.
Right. Okay.
Which is just a thin rolled brisket. Then you get like what's called the packer cut, which has got a lot more fat on the outside, the fat cap going across the back, and a lot more marbling inside, which works fine sat with smoke rolling over it. It's thicker, heavier, and that's what we use on the barbecue. Which is why, like Morrison's off the shelf or whatever, you can't stick it in a smoker. You have to go to a butcher. You have to ask for the specific cut. Otherwise, you end up with something that just turns into charred crap. But
basically being disappointed.
Yeah. All I'm going to put on our brisket is... This is good. It's like I'm just talking to the camera talking to you. So you throw your voice into it. All I'm putting on ours is pepper from ground peppercorns, so it's fresh ground, flaked salt, and garlic powder.
Okay.
So I will grind the pepper first and then put the flaked salt in with the pepper, not grind the flaked salt.
Yeah.
Because then you'll get really fine salt and you'll get really salty meat.
Right.
You want the flakes because they're larger surface area, so you don't get as dense salt packing on the meat. So using what would be considered very good quality meat for every other cut, but the British breeds, especially ones like we get with Perry's, are quite lean. So the more, like a Wagyu from this fancy imported stuff, has a hell of a lot more fat marbling through it, which keeps it more tender, which lends itself well to different cooking temperatures. So the only thing we're going to do here is we're going to put a bit of a cheat, we're going to inject beef stock into it.
Okay.
Which will just keep the inside slightly tastier. Because it requires very slow cooking. We've only got about 9 hours for our smoke today. So we're going to do that as well.
So that basically does the same job as the fat would do on the expensive ones?
Yeah, basically. Fat renders down, keeps it more moist, you get the nice leaking out of the juices. This adds a bit of flavour in. It also makes it so that you can enjoy less of it and get a stronger flavour.
Okay.
So if you ever eat a brisket from like an expensive competition or expensive shack where they're only giving you 2 or 3 pieces, they tend to have done things like injected with butter, injected with liquid stock to get loads of flavour in the very little amount you get, so you're not disappointed.
Okay.
But really, it's just liquid beef with some fats. You can use anything. You can use like liquid seasonings and stuff.
Yeah.
You get those weird, funny shaped bottles of liquid seasoning.
Yeah.
They work fine too. When you do injecting meat, you get lots of leakage coming back out. So you either inject it in like a dish, or people do it in bin bags. They stick the meat in a bin bag. It's a nice noise, that.
I was about to say, that's a really satisfying sound.
Yeah. And what you want to do is, with the way the meat grain basically goes, you don't want to go sort of through it, you want to go along it, so you're going between the fibres, so you get nice, that angle, see they're running that way, how they're cut, in there, well, something my fingers aren't long enough for. See, like, it plumps up in, it's really satisfying doing this to poultry, because you see it plumping up as you do it.
Oh yeah, you can see it rising there.
Yeah, in little areas. The other interesting thing with like putting these salt water mixes and stuff into meats, people are all like, "Oh, the meat's just injected with water and all that." It does make it taste nicer, you know. And if you're injecting it yourself, then you're not paying for the weight of it with injected. So who cares?
Yeah, at that point you've already bought the meat, so if you make it better, you make it better.
Yeah, but like having a slightly brined solution just under the surface of the meat causes it to retain more moisture while cooking when you're slow cooking it, rather than drying it out, which is what most people seem to think it does.
Yeah.
People say don't salt your meat because it dries it out, but if you salt your meat properly, what happens is all the salt on the top, I'll show you it with some grains of sea salt actually while we do this. So if I put some salt flakes there, clearly very salty, they will slowly go sort of translucent and into a mush, kind of like the slush you get on the roads when it's snowy and there's salt on, or when it's icy and there's salt on. So it takes a little while because obviously it's the movement of water from under the surface of the meat, so the salt draws the moisture out, right? You won't see the full process because it kind of happens overnight, but you'll see the start of it while I'm doing this.
Yeah.
And it'll take on like a shimmery sheen to the salt that's just been put on there as the water's drawn out of the meat. Then, once that sort of salt and meat juice liquid has mixed, it then sinks into the meat and sits just underneath the surface. So the salt then sits underneath the surface of the meat, which then in turn keeps more of the moisture inside. So any surface moisture is drawn in, it's retained, and what you get then is like that crisp, seared outer surface of the meat on top of it. So it's starting to go a little bit sort of translucent there. It takes a little while, but that's why flake salt is better too.
Yeah.
Surface area. It's not all about being fancy and poncy.
No, and letting it drip down your forearm.
Yeah. The rest of this stuff, that's obviously going to leak out. Keep some of that, because what you then do while this is cooking is you spritz it to keep it moist.
Okay.
So with smoke, the more moist your joint is, the more the smoke sticks to it. So wet surface, smoke will adhere better,
right,
and enter the meat. So once it starts to dry out, because it will, because it's in an oven, once it starts to dry out, you then spritz. I like the meatiest tasting brisket I can get.
Yeah.
So you can see the salt there is starting to go.
Yeah, it has
lift
got
it up
it,
anyway. It's starting to go kind of shimmery, translucent.
Almost like sheet ice.
Yeah, that's a process though that would take overnight.
Yeah.
And so it would take overnight normally to salt the mixture, see that happen, see it go in, and you call that dry brining, basically.
Okay.
You salt the meat before you use it. It's a really nice way of prepping meat, but again, it requires lots of time to prep. You don't lose out too much.
No.
For not doing it. You don't season the fat. Most people would trim it off. There's not a lot. It was already trimmed for me by the dudes at Perry's, so I don't need to. Because seasoning just doesn't stick to fat.
Oh, right, okay.
It just falls off, unless you really sort of push it in properly. So, nice and simple. What some people do, some people mustard the outside of the brisket. I've never done it. I was considering doing it today, but I don't fancy anything too fiery today.
So if you were to mustard it, what would that do differently to what you're doing now?
It would make whatever seasoning you put on adhere better.
Okay.
But at the same time, to me, I think that would form a barrier to the smoky flavour.
Yeah, because to begin with, you'd be smoking the mustard, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, and the mustard is kind of like, it's a moist sort of surface, but yeah, it's thicker, it's heavier, it's got lots of different flavours that I can't control in it too. Whereas I like the simple salt pepper, and my briskets are well known for being crazy high smoke ring, like really, really smoke ringy, and I think putting the mustard on reduces it from what I've seen.
But yeah, because it's an extra layer then of liquid that the smoke's got to penetrate, isn't it?
Yeah,
So that makes
exactly.
sense.
But yeah, you use a lot of seasoning. This is why buying ready-made seasoning sucks. You have to just buy your peppercorns and your salt and your garlic powder separately, because that much will have cost me like...
Well, that's like 4 bottles of pre-made, isn't it?
Yeah, that would have cost me hardly anything to do this, and this is just one side.
Yeah.
Like, I've got to very carefully, because I want to keep this liquor. Watch me just throw this everywhere.
Take 2.
That.
Yeah.
It's like a perfect... So most of this seasoning then really disappointingly falls off as soon as you pick up the meat, usually. That's pretty good. So there's some areas on the back which aren't covered, and I have some seasoning, so I am going to put some on anyway. So that's basically it. That brisket is ready.
Yeah.
Now I just need to get our smoker on and get the temperature in the smoker up to the heat we're going to cook
nice, isn't it? It's even raw.
Yeah, it just smells like you could just slice bits off and eat it sashimi style. chili, because why not? That's covered very nicely. You can see why they charge you like £10 in a restaurant just for that. I like it when it slides through easily. Right, that bit's the extra nice bit. It's going to make it burnt out style. All good? Right, plates. Anyone?